if we consider change in demand, then what type of changes will be there? Okay, there may be different type of changes with quantity demanded, with overall demand. So today's lecture is all about change in consumers' demand. If we consider different type of changes with consumers' demand, then we can say that there are two type of changes. First one, if there is change in quantity demanded, and second is change in overall demand. Okay, what is quantity demanded? Quantity demanded means a particular quantity which is demanded at a particular price. Quantity demanded can be studied under the movement along the same demand curve. Okay, if there is movement along the same demand curve, then it can be known as change in quantity demanded. And movement along the same demand curve is of two types, like upward movement and downward movement. For example, assume that this is the demand curve for a consumer, and in this demand curve, if consumer moves from point A to point B, it means consumer is moving upward. Okay, upward movement along the same demand curve refers to contraction in demand. It is also known as contraction in demand because in this condition the demand for the particular commodity falls. That's why this is called contraction in demand. And downward movement along the same demand curve happens because if a consumer moves from point A to point B, which is situated downward, and this downward movement is known as extension or expansion in demand. Next is change in demand. Change in demand can be studied with shift of demand curve, and shift of demand curve is also of two types. The shift of demand curve may be forward and the shift of demand curve may be backward. If the demand curve shifts forward, in that case we can say that there is increase in the demand, and if the demand curve shifts backward, then there will be decrease in the demand, just like this. The demand curve is DD and new demand curve is shifted from DD to D dash D dash. So the demand is increased. This is called increase in demand and forward shift of demand curve. And in other condition, there is a backward shift. Initial demand curve is DD and the DD demand curve shifted backward at D dash D dash. So this is called decrease in demand. Change in demand occurs because of change in the other factors, just like income of consumer, price of related goods, and the taste, fashion preference, if that will be changed, other than the substitute goods, availability of substitute goods, okay, and other future expectations, etc. But change in quantity demanded occurs because of price, change in its own price. Its own price may vary, it may increase or it may decrease in this condition, and other factors remains constant. Other factors remains constant. When? Only in the condition when we consider change in quantity demanded. Change in quantity demanded arise because of change in its own price. But other factors, that factors remains constant. And if the overall demand is changed here, so the reason behind the change in overall demand is when other factors like income, like price of related goods, like taste, fashion, preference, and other thing is future expectation. Okay, these factors may change. Availability of substitutes, etc. These will change, and what will be considered as fixed? That is price of own commodity. This symbol I have used to show the constant for the own price of a commodity.